I'm Steve Vinson, and you are about to experience the life science effect. Now it's time to go behind the scenes once again to talk to another leader who's out there making it happen. And we're here with Matt Wyatt, the president and CEO of Recovery Force, which he founded in 2013. Hi, Matt.
How are you today?
Great. Thanks for being on the show.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
In addition to founding Recovery Force, you're a Ball State grad.
Yes, sir.
Marketing and counseling psychology.
Right.
Maybe if things get bad enough during the interview, you could help me out a little with a few things. I don't know.
I do think the psychology probably is the most important part of all my education.
I'll bet. A lot of marketing is psychology, I would imagine. Right. So why don't we just start out? Tell us about yourself. You can fill in the gaps.
Sure. Family here in town. I grew up in Hancock County and went to local high school and watched Hamilton County grow, of course. And that's, we have two daughters and a wife, and been married for almost 20 years and happy residents here in Fishers, Indiana.
How old are your daughters?
They are 15 and 16.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they're in high school.
In high school, yeah.
I have that to look forward to. Mine are 10 and 13, so we're looking at high schools now.
That's wonderful.
They go to Hamilton?
Hamilton Southeastern, yep.
Southeastern, okay.
Yep.
Yep.
Great girls.
Fantastic.
Yep.
And so you've lived in the area since leaving Ball State?
Yes, okay. I've traveled a lot outside of the area and domestically and abroad, but always lived in the area and lived in Fishers most of the time. But grew up in Hancock County on a farm, so went to a local, Mount Vernon High School, and we knew of Hamilton Southeastern at the time. They were really small too, which is not the case anymore. Yeah.
So when we say life science, you started out on a farm.
Yep.
As close to life science as you can get, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah. Literally.
What sort of farm? What kind of crops or livestock or
grain farm and sheep and cattle.
Okay.
It was not our primary source of income. We were more gentleman farmers, if you will, but my grandparents were full-time farmers, and that's what was the early inspiration for growing up.
Okay. So what led you to pursue marketing and clinical psychology? Counseling psychology.
So ended up going to Ball State and was blessed to have a Emmons scholarship, which was a leadership scholarship, and paid for the majority of my school. That was very helpful and meaningful to the family, of course. But business was just kind of in my blood, I think, and that was just the road I took. Though once I graduated from school, I also was really inspired in the medical field in general. I didn't know what area of medical. But shortly after being out of school, ended up getting into the medical profession, I think really in the early 90s, and have been in med device in particular all my career.
How did that happen?
I initially started in sales, and the truth is I just had just interviewed with a lot of different people and had peers that were in the profession. One of the early motivations was just the intellectual stimulation, of course, that comes from it. Yeah. And obviously there was a compensation piece to it that was inspiring early on as well.
You were selling medical devices for who?
A couple different companies. Early in my career, I was on the pharma side early on for a couple years, and then got into med device and started in spinal internal fixation. So with a couple of different companies, some of which have been startups and exits, but early on it was a company called Synthase Spine, which is a Swiss-based company, domestically based in Philadelphia, and we were in the ORs with the surgeons and staff and helping give a little guidance on what types and sizes of screws and rods and plates and things to put people back together.
So I'm not sure how many of our listeners understand this, but I just figured this out 5 or 10 years ago, talking to some med device salespeople. Talk a little bit about your role in the operating room. I don't know that people realize how much of a role the med device salespeople have in those. Because when we think of salespeople, we think, I'm sorry, but the layperson thinks of the used car salesman, right? Which couldn't be farther from the truth when it comes to pharma in medical device
No,
sales.
that's very true.
So talk about your role in the operating room.
We call it, the company really called them consultants, calls us consultants.
Yeah.
I mean, the truth is it's some sales still, but at the end of the day, it's really relationships with the staff and with the physicians. But the role, and I'm dating myself because it's been some time, pardon me, since I've been in the operating room in those roles, but the sales or sales consultants literally, based on the trust that they've gained with the staff and the physicians, are present during many of the procedures and just really make sure that the proper instruments and the proper sizes of implants and things like that are used with the staff. They just give guidance. Now at the end of the day, they're not, the nurses and the techs and the surgeons are well equipped to do things without the presence of a medical salesperson.
Yeah.
However, it does help with their workflow and just making sure the proper implants are available and properly sterilized in advance. And just really, it's preparation as much as anything.
So you have a surgeon, highly trained surgeon, turning to you and saying, which screw should I use?
I wouldn't go quite that far, but they'll tell the staff what they want, and the sales folks oftentimes are in the background are making sure they're getting the proper size and length. And
that's fascinating to me. The only time I've ever been in an operating room, I was the
You're the patient.
I was the leading. I was the reason we were all there. Put it that way.
Right.
And I slept through most of it. So okay, so you do some sales. Some consulting work.
Right.
Where do you go from there?
So worked for a large company. Always had this enterprising entrepreneurial spirit to do more of a startup, and got recruited to be a part of an IDE study, which stands for, it's an acronym for Investigational Device Exemption. So, and this was back in the prosthetic disc days of spine, and so very much in a similar type of a role. I mean, a little higher, certainly higher risk. But learned through that whole process the regulatory, the regulatory processes, of course, intellectual property around patents and operations and manufacturing and design. It was very fortunate to get to be in that early stage startup where you got exposed to not just the operating room, but all the other pieces of the business that were required, and including quality systems and all those types of things that really make up a medical device company.
Yeah, and so you got to learn how the industry works,
Correct,
and how to get new products to market.
Correct.
So is that then when you decided with your entrepreneurial spirit you were gonna start your own at some point?
Somewhat. Right? So I was very fortunate to get to work with physicians and people that had, and MIT and Duke guys. It was just a great experience for me. But learned all different parts of the business for them. That company ultimately was acquired, and I loved it so much I wanted to do something else.
Yeah.
And so that's really what started me off on my own path. Okay. And when I say me on my own, not necessarily on my own, but to go find the people, the engineers and the regulatory people and the quality systems people, the operations people to start our own thing.
And you started Recovery Force at that point?
Had a couple short times in between there. Yeah. Before Recovery Force,
you started other companies.
Mm-hmm. And not just me, but as part of a couple other companies.
And what happened with those companies?
Well, one of them has since done an IPO. Oh. And is a publicly traded company, actually recently acquired by Stryker Corporation. So K2M is the name of the spine company that was recently sold to Stryker. Mm-hmm. It was great to get to see that thing started back in the early 2000s, and a lot of the people are still there, and it's just great to have seen that. So I learned a lot from that experience, of course. But then I had two smaller little deals that I had started and exited before we started Recovery Force.
And when you say exit, you either sold it or did any of them fail? Or
they did all sell. Wow. None of them failed, which.
You have the golden touch.
Well, I don't know about that. I've been very blessed to be in the right market at the right time with the right people. I wouldn't say it's luck, but it's certainly I've been fortunate. The way
luck favors the prepared, right?
Well, I think that's well put.
Yeah. Right. So younger listeners just starting out in their career, they feel a little entrepreneurial maybe, but they have bills and they have, they have a secure job maybe, or what we used to call a secure job.
Right.
So what would we kind of went through, you worked for corporations and then you worked for a startup and it was acquired. Were you able to did you save up a bunch of money so you could start your own thing, or did you get something as part of that acquisition? Where did the capital come from, I guess is what I'm asking, to start your own thing?
It's a terrific question. The answer to that is yes. I mean, not enough money to really start what we ultimately started, but a little bit of a safety net. But what I will say, and this is a critical piece for folks that are interested in starting their own businesses, or just in general entrepreneurs, maybe just people in general. Don't live at your means, whatever that is, right? Just always save. And I've been a really good steward of money since I was a little guy. Even my parents would remind me I would save Christmas money and birthday money, and
nice.
And so but what the hard truth is, no matter how good your idea is, no matter how enterprising you are, and how promising a company might be, if you don't have the capital or the savings to be able to start, even if it doesn't cost you money to start, you still have a lifestyle that you have to maintain. You have to have funds to do that. And so you have to be really important to be very mindful of that. And it's not something that gets talked about often,
right?
But you have to be very mindful of that at early on in your career or life.
I know in the U.S., maybe the Midwest even more so, talking about money. When I grew up, my parents, they didn't intentionally, I don't think, do this, but talking about money was just an impolite conversation to have, right?
Yeah.
And I think the result is a lot of us, and maybe it's gotten better, but a lot of people don't think about or talk about, hey, you need to live under your means. Just because you get a raise doesn't mean you can go spend it, right?
No, you're exactly right. And I think that conversation needs to happen early on with our kids.
So if somebody's trying to bootstrap, let's say, bootstrap is one of the, maybe they don't have the huge idea that they're going to be able to go get an angel investing or seed capital or something like that. They're going to need to spend some time either in the evenings or in the weekends, or if they are good stewards of money like you were, then maybe they could take some time off of working to get that idea to a point, maybe where some angels.
Correct.
So when you went out and started your thing, so you had your own savings, you also got some investors to come along with you and co-founders maybe.
Yeah, on the early ones. Yes. Now with Recovery Force, I had an exit, and so I had some time to really think about what I was going to do next. And the hard truth is, when you have had a couple exits, that gives a lot of confidence to future investors, right? And because they know you've been knocked around, and they know you've made mistakes, and you probably won't make the same ones. And there's now a history and a track. And so, had I not have had I call them singles or doubles, so to speak, hits, prior to founding Recovery Force, I wouldn't have been able to start Recovery Force, because this company has required a significant amount of capital over the last 5 to 6 years to run it, because we're still pre-revenue. We're not a startup, but we are pre-revenue. And the money I raised was from people that had seen success prior, or maybe even invested it prior, or not invested and wish they had have invested, which is why they're a part of this company. Great point.
So you seem to talk a lot about being blessed and having good. Finding the right people to surround yourself with, and relationships. One of the first things you mentioned was relationships in med device sales. What would you say, all those things sound like leadership to me. So what would you say has been something you're most proud of, and how did your leadership play a role in that?
I'm always most proud of the people, honestly. And this company, people will often say, well, this is your idea, this is your company. And the truth is, it's not my company at all, especially when you have investors, it's not your company. And I could never have done this on my own. So it's always about the people. And I think we've, including all your listeners, have witnessed there are really great technologies out there, or good ideas, but not without the right people involved, they'll never see the light of day, or something bad will happen.
How do you make sure you get the right people? So far, it sounds like you've gotten the right people. You're one of the right people, probably, even though it sounds like you'd be the last to admit it. But what do you do to make sure you find good people?
That's a really good question.
I'm going to guess it's not an ad in the paper.
No, no. That's a really good question. I don't know that I have a secret answer for that. Actually, if I did, I'd tell you. But
I guess, what is the quality? How do you know a good person when you see them? What's a quality that you look for?
You can take classes, and HR people will always, you always have to understand the processes of hiring. And I've done a lot of hiring in my past with the larger companies. But at the end of the day, it's a gut, right? It really is a gut feeling, whether you trust the person, you look at their track record, and you make a gut decision. I think most of it is just character, and the older you get, at least at my stage in life, you can cut through that pretty quick with people. If someone's buffalo and you or not.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've still make mistakes, but in general, I think if people are equally yoked, so to speak, I mean, if you like them and they like you, there's kind of a base like that, and then you figure out what are their skill sets that are they feel a match that you don't have, and I have a lot of gaps in my skill set, so I go look for people that have those skill sets that are also the right people, and when I say right people, I mean a lot of that in character.
So when it comes to skill sets, you're probably looking for people that have something you don't.
Sure.
When it comes to character, you're probably looking for people that have stuff that you do have, right?
That's probably fair to say.
Because you want a set of shared values, right?
Shared values, but not. But you also don't. I don't want people that just agree with everything that I think and say either. There's risk in that. People with the right characters, though, don't. They're willing to challenge and be challenged. And
Do you at Recovery Force? Do you have that sort of open atmosphere where people challenge each other? And
oh yeah,
good.
Oh, for sure, sure.
Yeah. You mentioned sometimes you make mistakes, and you may have known I was going to ask. Tell me about a lesson you learned, something that didn't go right. You've had a lot of successes, so it may be hard to think of one. But when did something not go right, and how did leadership either pull you out of that bad situation, or maybe how did lack of leadership get you into that? Maybe not your own, but somebody else's leadership get you into that situation.
There's constant challenges. I don't know if I'd even call them all mistakes, but they're just constant challenges. Some people, you could call it a mistake, I guess, but that's not just part of being an entrepreneur or business. This is part of life, right?
Yeah.
Every day there are challenges. I would say, just front of mind, most recent, with very respect to this company, is one thing I didn't completely accept, or didn't accept, that I didn't completely understand are as we're in this product development process, I didn't really understand from the engineering side of things the importance of user requirements and the importance of, intuitively knew the market needed what what I had conceptualized on a napkin years and years ago, but there's a long gap and a long tail on ultimately what are the requirements in the marketplace. And our first product that we designed, we kind of built a solution for what we thought the market wanted. We did it backwards, and I think a lot of companies big companies do that. Yeah. And if there's anything I could rewind the tape on and do over again, which I won't do this again, would be very mindful of what are the requirements of the product or service that you're thinking about before you complete it and get it out to the market.
Yeah.
Ask all the questions, do all the heavy lifting, and take as much bias out of it as you can, because we all drink our own Kool-Aid, so to speak. And,
right.
And don't mean to be biased. But we're humans, and when you're this passionate about something, whatever it is you're passionate about, just try to keep your own bias out of it too.
Yeah. One of the phrases that is really popular now is minimum viable product. I don't know if you guys use that around here very much, but it's been one of the revolutions in my thinking. As a project manager, I'm all about user requirements and planning and the fortunate or unfortunate, depending on your mindset, I guess, of high technology is by the time you figure out, if you're going to sit in a conference room or in an engineering lab or something to build a product that you think the market's going to want, you may have been right a year ago when you started, but you're not going to be right now. And so getting something, maybe that's a question, is like, how do you get what you're calling user requirements? Do you put a product out there and see how it works and get feedback on the product, or do you interviews, or how do you get those user requirements?
So great question. And in our case, as quickly as we can prototype something out and test it, we have so many requirements from quality side and FDA requirements that it's there's safety and risk. So it takes a lot longer for us to get something out there to even get those get those user experiences and some certain requirements back. But we do it as best we can, right? On the med device side, a lot of your listeners, I suspect, they're much more technically advanced than I see myself, and so I think getting something out there and testing it as quickly as they can with that are low risk, of course, is the best way to do it. And
yes,
and don't ask your mom and dad to be the users.
They're going to love it.
Yeah, find the person that likes you the least in the world, and let them tell you what they think of it.
I think you made an excellent point there in the life sciences, especially. If you're making an app for the App Store on the iPhone, hey, get something out there. If it doesn't work, who cares? Right. That's feedback, right? But in our industry, there are real people who could have real problems.
Right.
In pharmaceuticals, it's even longer because to get it into humans, and you have to go through animal trials, and then you go through multiple human trials. It's years or a decade before you get something out there. Right. And by the time you get it out there, maybe it's not what the market needs anymore.
It's possible.
It's a huge challenge of pharma. I was listening to somebody tell their story about medical device technology that they've been trying to get out for 4 years. And when they first started, they thought it would be a year. Right. But then they ran into a lot of the regulatory and quality requirements, which I think FDA is cognizant of. And they want medical innovations because that's part of their charter. Of course. It's not just to keep bad things from getting to the market, it's to help good things get to the market. So that'll be our challenge over the next 5 or 10 years is, how do you get something to the market quickly, minimizing your risk, right?
Exactly, and it always, no matter if you're on the med device and biotech side or a lawn mowing company, right? Yeah. It usually takes more time and takes more money than you thought it was going to take.
Good point. Yeah.
And on the medical side of things, though, FDA is they're I always think of the FDA as they are the advocate for the consumer, and at the end of the day, they want the best, brightest technologies out there, but not at the expense of a human. So they're there to protect, right? And so everything we do on the industry side has to be in the spirit of what's best for the end user or patient in our case.
Absolutely.
And that takes a lot of time and money to do that.
We are very proud to have the support of the Indiana Health Industry Forum here at the Life Science Effect. They have been with us since day one. IHIF provides guidance and leadership on public policy issues that contribute to innovation in the health science sector, deliver therapies to patients in need, and further the development and growth of their member companies. IHIF also works with the government and other groups to support specific initiatives and legislation. Also, if you need a connection in the health industry, give them a call. Go to ihif.org and they will hook you up. They have been a tremendous supporter of ours, so thanks again to the Indiana Health Industry Forum. Go check out ihif.org and support them like they support our life science community. Now, back to the show.
So before we wrap up, just a few quick sort of rapid fire questions. Is there a defining moment in your career where you could look back and go, okay, that was the watershed moment where, everything changed and led me to where I am today?
I would say two things happened. One, I'll never forget putting a picnic table together on the back deck when I was working for a big company at the time, and I had this quest to want to do something on my own, or not necessarily on my own, but break away and do something a bit more risky and start up. And I'll never forget, I was putting together this table, and the wind caught this tempered glass tabletop, knocked it over on the deck, and it shattered in a gazillion pieces, right? And it was this crash, and I don't even think we had the girls were born yet, but my wife comes running out of the house and says, what happened? And saw that the thing fell. Well, I also had, my eyes were welling up, and she's like, why are you? Why? I've never even seen your eyes well up. Why are you upset about this? We can just go to Lowe's and get another table. And I said, it's not the table. I said, it's symbolic of my career and where I'm at. And within 60 days, I had left that company and really gotten started. So that was a defining moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'd tell you the most other defining moment, and you don't get very many defining moments in your life, right? True. So you have to. So the other defining moment for me was, prior to starting Recovery Force, I didn't know exactly what I was going to do. So I'd have a whiteboard full of all kinds of things. Some of them were silly ideas. Some of them were very formal corporate things. And I'll never forget going to mass that Saturday night. And I always ask for peace and health of the family. But this time I need some clarity. Yeah. I need something. I need to get some guidance on how to vet what to do next. And literally the next day, the 3 P's popped into my head. And the 3 P's for me were purpose, passion, and prosperity. And to this day, I actually have a little logo and a coin that I've had made. But what purpose, passion, prosperity became for me was the filter, if you will, for what I was going to go do next. So it had to be a purpose. It had to be purposeful. I had to be passionate about it, because you got to, as an entrepreneur, if you don't get shot out of a cannon every morning, you are gonna get worn out. And then of course, prosperity. It needed to be something that was going to provide lifestyle for my family or future for others. And when I went back to that whiteboard, there was probably 14 or 15 things on the list. Only one of them fit the filter of all 3. Many of them felt the filter of 1 or 2 of them, but only one fit all 3, which happened to be what we're doing today with Recovery Force.
Wow, that's fantastic. So go back to when you were much younger. What advice would you give young Matt?
Oh gosh, it's always risky to give people advice.
Yeah, but in this case, you're giving yourself advice.
Work hard. You have to work hard. And people say, well, just work smart. Well, you got to do both, right? Yeah. You have to don't work hard. Do the right thing, and then do the next right thing. I know it sounds so cliche and simple, but it's not really hard to do that. And don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of failing. Don't be afraid of things not working out. And I've got a history of other things I'm sure that didn't really work out, and probably some of which I've just forgotten. Yeah.
Hey, having a blind spot for the failures, as long as you learn the lesson and you move on.
I don't dwell. I don't want anyone to think that I haven't made mistakes and had failures along the way, but because you have failures within the successes, though. We're talking about successful exits, but there are all kinds of mistakes and failures along the way within each one of those things. You just have to persevere. Exactly. You just know it's going to be hard. Yeah. Which is why I think for your young people, don't be afraid to work hard and know that things aren't always fair. They're not easy, and it is what it is.
Yeah. How do you balance it all? You're on a few boards. You're the president and CEO of a company, wife and kids, and I'm sure you're involved with your church. And how do you balance everything?
It's a good question. I'm not sure. I don't know if I have a single.
So if I were to ask your wife, maybe she would say, "Well, he doesn't."
Yeah, that's probably true.
What would she say? Do you think? I mean, your family loves you, and they'd love to have you 100% of the time. But do you think that they feel like you spend good quality time with them? And
I think so. And I think we as individuals, we choose what we really want to do. So when people say they're busy, I think it's kind of an excuse for not doing something else. We always do what we want to do, right? Whether it's good behaviors or bad behaviors, but people choose what they want to do. So I love my wife and daughters, and so I want to be available to them, and vice versa. I love working. I love what we do here, and so I make myself available for that. And I probably don't have as much of a, if it wasn't for my wife, I wouldn't have much of a social life because she plans fun stuff. Yeah. But I love doing that. So I don't know if that really answers your question.
I think I knew part of the answer before I asked it. Purpose, passion, prosperity. I mean, if you have purpose and passion, and it's for a great good.
That's true. Yep.
To create abundance for others and yourself, and gosh, I mean, it kind of balances itself.
That's a really, really good point. I hadn't thought about it quite that way. I will say those 3 Ps, though, can be applied. It doesn't have to be applied to your business, right? You can apply it to your spiritual life, your personal life, or your social life. You can apply those 3 to.
And in fact, I would argue you in order to be in full integrity with all 3 of those, you almost have to apply it to everything.
That's true.
Like you can't, when you walk out the front door here, you can't go, now I don't have to be passionate anymore.
No, that's a really, really good point. And I think people in general, their personal lives and their professional lives and should mirror each other, right? You don't really behave. You really, at least I don't think I do, and try not to behave differently in one setting or another.
A lot of people do. I got to tell you, I used to.
Yeah.
I used to think that I had to. I thought, when I get to work, I have to be one person.
Yeah.
And then I'm a different person when I'm who I really am when I'm at home, right?
Yeah.
So that could be a whole other hour-long discussion about, how do you remain, true to yourself,
right,
at work and at home and at clubs and wherever you go, but that's a much longer podcast. I think
I think being the authentic you is the right answer all the time, right?
I agree.
Otherwise, you can't keep things straight
within the framework of where you, in the always holding the context of where you are, right?
Correct.
So I don't get you. Maybe you're you cuss like a sailor at home. That doesn't mean being true to yourself means you cuss like a sailor at work. Maybe it does. Maybe it does, but maybe you need to think about what kind of career
you're going to differently, right?
Yeah, filter it a little bit differently. So, do you have an online resource or a book or something just to put a punctuation mark at the end that you would recommend to people? Is there something that's been really helpful for you?
I don't have a specific piece of content that I go to.
Okay.
But when I think about your question versus here's a book that I'd recommend to someone, I think for me the best thing to do is just observe and listen, because you can learn so much from others, and so probably the most raw example of that would be if you're going to go to the gym. And you pay attention to the people that are the most fit there, and then do what they're doing.
Yes,
it's not rocket science, right? I mean, and work. And if you're going to work out with somebody, work out with someone that's in a lot better shape than you are, right? I mean, it's going to stretch you. So
you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, right?
Right.
So make them, bring your average up.
Right. And I think you can apply that kind of principle to everything. So that's why I don't necessarily have a.
2 things popped in my head as you were talking about wisdom, and you didn't say wisdom, you said listening and observing, and it made me think of wisdom. I just started a book that you might be interested in. I'll send you the link. And I found out about it through a podcast I listened to, which I'll tell you about as well. But the guy that there was a famous, well, not too famous, I didn't know who he was, but a guy in San Francisco who was a really successful hotelier.
Okay.
The CEO of Airbnb called him up. The CEO of Airbnb was in his probably late 20s, early 30s. This guy was in his mid 50s maybe. And he called him up. He said, Airbnb is a tech company. We want to be a hospitality company. And he brought the guy over. And so he wrote a book called The Making of a Modern Elder. And it really got me thinking. I'll be 50 next year. And it got me thinking, as I enter this stage of my career, with tech, and everybody's younger these days in the workplace, so I would recommend that to the people, I guess at any age, but as you're entering the late summer, autumn of your career. You know,
right.
The making of a modern elder. And then the other one is the podcast I thought of as we were talking is Akimbo. Do you know who Seth Godin is?
Yeah.
By any chance?
Yeah.
Okay. He has a podcast. He just started about a year ago.
Okay.
It's fantastic. It's like 20, 25 minutes. Very, bite-sized.
Yep.
And if you know who he is, you know he's known for marketing, but really life. I mean, the guy is just wise beyond his years. So I'll send you a link to that.
I'd love it. Yeah,
and maybe that would be a good one to start with, and you could kind of go from there.
Perfect.
This has been a great conversation, Matt.
Well,
I really appreciate it. Is there anything you wanted to say that I didn't ask the right question for?
No, I thought it was great. Appreciate the opportunity to share and hope it's meaningful to at least one of your audience members.
Fantastic. Thanks.
You bet.
Thanks for listening to The Life Science Effect. Don't miss an episode. Be sure and like, subscribe, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. That really, really helps. And go on over to thelifescienceeffect.com to find all the ways to listen and how to get a hold of me and tell me who you think should be on the show. Now, what effect will you cause?